Welcome to McGuire on Wrestling.
What do you guys want to talk about?
Let's give the people what they want. Professional wrestling.
With Mike McGuire.
The happiest Canadian camper in the world.
Tell me when I'm telling lies.
Give me a hell yeah.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for downloading this week's episode being recorded on Mother's Day, May the 12th, 2024. This is episode number 54 of McGuire on Wrestling, which you can check out every week by downloading at McGuireShow.com. And I do have some exciting news regarding some radio partnership coming up in the future, but that's down the line here. It's all very, very slow moving, hurry up and wait sort of stuff, as tends to be things. All of a sudden, it shows up and it's go, go, go. But in the meantime, thank you for checking out this show. If it's your first time here, the mantra is very simple. The show is always free and always about wrestling. We try and have a good time talking about pro wrestling. We don't just sit here and whine and complain about what we don't like. Oh, this is dumb. This is... Don't get me wrong. We can have those thoughts. We think them. We just figure if you're going to spend time downloading a show and listening to something, maybe you want to hear about things that people enjoy and you might enjoy as well. If you hit that subscribe button, give a 5-star review, leave some happy comments or whatever comments, really. The 5-star thing is what helps us get things noticed and get things going along. That is so appreciated. But also, if you want to, and I can't believe people do this, thank you so much. We went over a year without asking for this or even giving you an opportunity to do this in any way. But some people have been wanting to just send a tip for the show, send something via PayPal. And so we put that up a couple weeks ago, and a lot of you have already done that. So thank you so much. It means so much to us. It helps cover the internet bills. It helps us make sure all our stuff is sounding good. And we want to keep bringing you professional wrestling talk. Get it? Anyway, so you can find that at McGuireShow.com as well. And again, the show will never ask you to pay for the content, but people were like, hey, we like the t-shirt store, but we don't need t-shirts. We just want to support the show. How can we do that? So that's how that is done. That's the last I'm talking about today. I had a ton of fun this weekend. I was out on the road, and by out on the road, I mean really, I drove to Calgary, which is 2 hours away from me, and then I drove to Medicine Hat, which is 2.5 hours away from Calgary, and then I drove back home here to Lethbridge, Alberta, which is about an hour and 45 from where I was there. I did have the Wrestle Wagon, or Lois's Dream Machine, which felt appropriate to have with me this Mother's Day weekend. If you know the whole story there, you already know. If you don't, my mom passed away a couple years ago. I had bought her this camper, which I am never getting rid of, and it is branded as Lois's Dream Machine. It's literally got that scribed on the side of it. But as I was going across Canada the year that she passed away, I was meeting wrestlers and going to wrestling shows and doing interviews, and so it kind of earned this nickname of the Wrestle Wagon. So the Wrestle Wagon rides again, and this weekend it took me to a couple shows again for Canada's Wrestling Elite between Calgary and Medicine Hat, and I'm going to talk more about what happened over these couple of days here. I want to give that crew a massive shout out. This is really the last of its kind across Canada, especially, and maybe even North America. I know Dave Meltzer said that once in a previous episode. But Danny Warren, hotshot Danny Duggan, sorry, kayfabe fella, but he and his crew tour the country. They do Eastern Canada, Western Canada. They'll bring in names. We had Savio Vega on this run. We had Jimmy Jacobs come in for a few shows as well. A ton of fun and all sorts of venues, all sorts of crowds. In fact, I saw two very different crowds between Calgary and Medicine Hat. We'll talk about that as well. But a big shout out to that crew. Thank you again for having me on board to just play ring announcer and host for your shows. Some really great matches, some really great fun, and I'll tell you exactly how Savio and them did as well, because it was really, really good. There have been some things that have happened in the last week. Some stories have popped up we're going to talk about with Dave Meltzer in just a few minutes, and some feedback from fans just like you who were at AEW Dynamite in Edmonton this past Wednesday. We're not going to talk about the dirtbags that made all the news on Twitter, because frankly, they don't deserve the praise, but we will get some live on-hand experience from people that were at both AEW this go-round and last time they came through Edmonton. Also, coming up this week, Cody Rhodes versus Logan Paul for both their titles hasn't been announced officially yet, but fans aren't quite sure how to feel about it if it is. Meanwhile, is AEW's champion playing second fiddle to everybody else? The King and Queen of the Ring tournaments have seen many changes in just the last couple of weeks and have seen some action at house shows. Some Canadian indie stars get time to shine thanks to AEW's continued Canadian stops. We'll get some of your feedback from people that were there. And speaking of indies, like I said, I was on the road this weekend for a couple of shows with CWE. I've got some fun stories there for you. Dave Meltzer is here and a lot more, but let's go through the 5 biggest stories of the week. It is the 5 count.
You want to hear the breaking news?
We begin with one of the most recent, and that was last night at New Japan Pro Wrestling's Resurgence 2024. It was a strong show that happened in California and saw a potential serious injury for one Eddie Kingston. Now, Eddie was defending his New Japan Strong Championship against Gabe Kidd, and the match was a no-ropes, last man standing match. So this meant basically anything goes. I had a chance to watch the match after I got back from Medicine Hat this morning, and it's grim. Like, it's really grim. What happened was Gabe ends up suplexing Eddie off the ring through a table that was set up between the guardrail and the ring apron itself. And Eddie goes back so far that if you can imagine the back of your knees landing across the top of the guardrail and then snapping forward just from the whiplash there, Eddie was down for a considerable amount of time and then managed to roll into the ring, even though he had lost the match and his championship. Rolls back into the ring, only be confronted by Jack Perry and attacked by the Young Bucks. They are now setting up an angle as they head towards AEW and New Japan's Forbidden Door. There have been various reports that have come out. I'm sure we'll find out more. We talked about it with Dave Meltzer and as AEW hits TV this week. Well, injuries have also been plaguing the King and Queen of the Ring tournaments. Earlier today, we found out Zelina Vega was being pulled from the tournament due to not being medically cleared. Right as I'm recording this very 5 count story, there is a result from the subbed out Queen of the Ring match involving Maxine Dupree and Shayna Baszler. Yeah, I don't think it's a surprise here. Shayna Baszler winning by submission. It's not known if there's going to be any more King and Queen of the Ring tournament matches happening at live events, but it's kind of a neat way to do it and make you check out their social media at the same time. Well, TKO, WWE's parent company, continuing to streamline operations as 2 big executives have been let go from the company in the past week. Michael Levin served as the Vice President of International Events and General Manager of Emerging Markets, has left the company over the last few days here. He was working out of London, England at the time, and was said to be a part of the Backlash France event happening. And another longtime WWE employee, Steve Rubin, who was with the company for 25 years as the Senior Director of TV Event Relations, was cut from the company this past week as well. It's still not known if any other changes are going to occur as far as the streamlining of TKO's UFC and WWE management teams go. Well, speaking of streamlining things, let me know if you'd be interested in attending this kind of a weekend, where Friday, it starts off with Dana White's Power Slap, to be followed by a UFC pay-per-view on Saturday and a WWE Premium Live event on Sunday. At a recent press conference, UFC President Dana White said exactly that could be a possibility in the future. Now, it's interesting to note that out of those entities, Power Slap isn't actually owned by TKO, even though they are greatly affiliated with the UFC thanks to Dana White's involvement in it, obviously. Nevertheless, anything is possible in this new world of sports entertainment coming together between MMA, pro wrestling, and Power Slap. We're talking about it again. Yippee. And would you like to hear Jerry the King Lawler and good old JR commentate at least one more match together? Well, that's an opportunity that Jim Ross has said he's open to if the right circumstances there. And of course, this all came up as it was discovered that Jerry Lawler's broadcasting contract with WWE has not been renewed. Now, word is he still has a Legends deal with the company, but nevertheless, Jerry Lawler, now a free agent. Of course, he did have some major health issues over the last calendar year here, including losing his ability to speak for some time. Now, he does have his voice back, and he's doing well. However, King hasn't taken to a wrestling microphone in some time now. In other commentary news, sending our best wishes out to Taz, who had to miss last week's AEW Dynamite due to some ongoing issues he's been having with his knees in particular. It was just over a week ago that Taz said the doctors are recommending that both his knees and his shoulders be replaced. For now, he's trying what's called regenerative treatment to try and fix the problem. A couple of big names are having WWE contracts come up in discussion around them. We'll talk about that. Plus, Cody Rhodes possibly defending his WWE Championship against Logan Paul, who could be defending his WWE United States Championship in a winner-take-all match. That's what's being rumored for the King and Queen of the Ring main event. But is that the match you're wanting to see? We'll talk about that and a lot more with the Wrestling Observer's Dave Meltzer on the way. Also, some of your feedback from AEW in Canada this week and some stories of independent wrestling, brother. But first, it was this day, May the 12th in 1997, that a former WWE champion would assault a disabled man on national television, and the crowd went wild for it. At least, that's the story as it looked on TV. Plus, a certain member of royalty would welcome in Mr. Monday Night. This all happened on the same show. We'll tell you about that, plus Dave Meltzer on the way.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
You got to stream the alternate commentary table. Every single Saturday, it's brought to you on the McGuire on Wrestling feed. I'm one half of your host, Dimitri Karolis, and I'm here with my partner, Mitch Hondras. Mitch, what is the alternate commentary table?
It's simple. It's the perspective of wrestling from the other side of the railing, the real fans.
That's right, the perspective that you need. You might have a little bit of fun, too. The alternate commentary table. Subscribe free now to the McGuire on Wrestling podcast feed wherever you get your podcast. Shasha!
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
On May the 12th, in 1997, it was a Monday night, which meant Monday Night Raw saw one of the most infamous promo segments in the rivalry between Bret the Hitman Hart and the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels take place. Now, this is the time that Bret was recovering from a knee surgery and leading the Hart Foundation faction at the time, when he would deliver a now infamous rant against Shawn Michaels.
You didn't have the guts to face me like a man. Instead, you were too busy posing for girly magazines.
Now, what the segment is most famous for is actually running out of time before we could get the big payoff to Bret's speech.
Violent people know.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll keep our cameras rolling.
That this piece of crap right here was never...
The cameras did roll, and we would find out 5 days later that Shawn Michaels would end up super kicking Bret Hart back onto the wheelchair that Bret would rise up from during his rant.
You'd like to hit me, but you don't have the insights to do it.
Shortly afterwards, the Hart Foundation would brawl against Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels to end the show. And also on that Raw, a fresh face would be joining the roster in ECW's new Mr. Monday Night on Raw, Rob Van Dam, being brought into the company by none other than Jerry the King Lawler.
ECW is nothing but low-budgeted, very low-talented wannabes that cannot hold on to someone with the extreme talents of Rob Van Dam.
It's time for the Wrestling Observer Insider with Dave Meltzer, McGuire on Wrestling.
Dave, you got to see a lot of Canadian talent on AEW Dynamite this week. Also, talents that are making themselves known here in Canada, including one Dynamite kid, Tommy Billington. I'd love to know your thoughts.
Oh, he was very good. He had a good match. I thought Dax Harwood did a fantastic job with him. I love to see stuff like that because it's really a thing where you show how good of a worker you are when you get yourself over and also help get the other guy over, where you both benefit from it. Because he could not look weak because he's wrestling Okada on Wednesday night, in a championship match. But he still gave the guy enough to where the guy got a standing ovation when it was over. To me, that's like a great working performance when you win, but you put the other guy over at the same time in a big way, not in a wink, wink way. It was like the perfect match for what it was. But Tommy, look, man, every single thing he does is a Dynamite Kid move, though. Every spot he did, I'm watching going like, oh, I remember this spot in this match. I remember this spot in this match. I mean, it was just like the guy must have just studied his uncle to a degree that's just unfathomable to, you know what I mean? To just.
So the funny thing about Tommy is when I first met him and his brother Mark, they came over from England as the Billington Bulldogs. And of course, they're still going to be working as that. Mark had a bit of a shoulder injury that he was working on. But when I first met them, Tommy especially was very, very quiet, very reserved. And I hadn't actually seen them in action yet. And then he comes out and he's just a rocket. Like he's just explodes all over the place when it comes to his work. Crazy aerial stuff. Everything's intense. Everything's quick. And then he just goes back to being this quiet guy. You know, it's almost like spooky when you see someone like that, right? Because they know when it's time to pour it on and get the work in, you know?
Yeah, hopefully he does really well for himself. He's got a lot of talent.
Other guys we saw include the Voros twins on Collision last night. That was what it was for a trios match.
Now, didn't really have the time to really...
and then we saw Mo Jabari out of Calgary, who is...
on Wednesday night.
As well as Harlan Abbott, who actually runs a pretty successful promotion up in Edmonton called Top Talent Wrestling, where they just had Mustafa Ali up there for a show last night. Yeah. And, you know, it seems to be in Canada, especially indie wrestling. I was at 2 shows over the weekend, one in Calgary, one in Medicine Hat here with Savio Vega, and Jimmy Jacobs was on one of the shows before he had to go to Collision in Vancouver. But I mean, wrestling, again, thriving all over Western Canada, Eastern Canada, United States, everywhere. I mean, what a time to just be a wrestling fan. And it's amazing that all these people are able to fit in the work now compared to trying to find work before.
That's always a good thing when there's a lot of shows going on, you know, because it helps guys, you know, obviously they get to be much, much better. It's always cool to have regular live wrestling in your area, you know, just the social aspect of it and just supporting, you know, guys on the way up. I always think it's great to support indie wrestling. I wish I did more. If there wasn't so much freaking television of wrestling I have to cover, I'd be going to a lot more indie shows. I mean, I used to go all the time.
Yeah.
And you know, I saw a lot of guys, you know, from their start, and it's really cool to see.
Well, we'll talk about one of those guys in a bit here, but I do want to move on to some of the things we've seen on TV this week. Let's go back to this Friday, though, on WWE SmackDown. Huge announcement made for the King and Queen of the Ring main event, and that is Cody Rhodes and Logan Paul, title for title, winner take all?
I guess so. I asked if that was official, and they said I mean, I expect that they brought it up. It has to be, but
right.
I mean, I guess it's not official, but it'll probably be official next Friday at the contract signing. But yeah, it's interesting because what do? Is that the way Logan loses the U.S. title and then you do a tournament for it? Because I can't imagine Cody having both belts. That doesn't even make any sense. The match itself, I think, is a great idea. You know, I mean, Logan Paul he's tremendous, and there's a lot of people who follow what he does. So him wrestling Cody, I think that's a great match for, you know, the big picture and trying to get Cody exposure in places that he won't normally get exposure and just build a pay-per-view around the idea of Logan Paul in a pay-per-view main event. He's got more of a following than almost anyone on that roster. You know, it'd be him, Cody, Roman Reigns. Obviously, Dwayne's got more than all of them put together, but I mean, he's right there in that upper tier.
You have to think this is part of WWE's offering the Saudis a marquee main event as well. That always seems to be something they really go for, is they want something big happening on those shows. Even if in North America, they're kind of seen as sometimes a B show down there. I mean, that is a marquee match. And that is a marquee match for fans in North America as well, for all the reasons you mentioned there. Is there any scenario where Cody does keep both titles if he wins?
I mean, you can always do it. I just don't understand the purpose of it, because to me, it just wastes the U.S. title. Because Cody shouldn't be defending the U.S. title without defending the world title. That doesn't really make any sense to me. But there are ways to do it. You know, you could have him hold both belts and then somebody beats him for the U.S. belt, and then that guy immediately gets a world title shot, and you can do a program from there. It's not inherently terrible, but there's something that rings wrong to me about it, and maybe that's actually my problem. It's because there are ways to book it to make it work.
Well, I guess we'll have to see what happens in a couple weeks at the PLE. Speaking of things that make money and angles that make money. Obviously, that's why wrestling companies do what they do. Is it fair to say that CM Punk and Drew McIntyre is the new money angle in WWE?
Certainly one of them. I mean, I think the biggest one is still, Rock and Cody's the biggest one. And maybe Roman Reigns coming back against Solo Sikoa, and Drew and Punk. Those would probably be the big ones. Yeah.
Any idea, any timeline on when the Roman Solo thing might start kicking off?
No, I don't know. I mean, logic would say that Roman, if he's going to come back for a big show at SummerSlam, right? That's the next big one. So, but they could save that for WrestleMania for next year easily and go with, that easily could be saved. I mean, when Jimmy and Jay had their split, they made sure to save it for Mania. I would say SummerSlam or Mania. It doesn't need to be on Rumble.
Jumping over to some contract news with WWE, and this is all stuff that either came out through interviews or have been reported. Kevin Owens recently saying that he's got about 9 months left on his WWE contract. Becky Lynch reportedly only has 3 weeks left in her current deal. So let's start with Owens first. He seems very happy with WWE, doesn't imagine himself going anywhere else. Where do you think, as someone who follows the business, where do you think Kevin Owens sits as far as a position to negotiate staying with?
I feel Kevin has great leverage because they know that he can go to AEW, and they know that he'll be a superstar in AEW, which gives him great leverage in WWE. I'm not saying he should go. He should go wherever he's happy, and I think he's happy right now where he's at. But I think he'd also be happy in AEW because he's got a lot of friends there. So I think he's in great, just like Drew McIntyre. I thought they were in great leverage positions. Becky Lynch, I just can't imagine her going now that Seth signed. I figured like whatever they were going to do, they were going to do together, which I assumed was going to be WWE. Not that it would be impossible for them to go, but I just didn't see it for those two especially. Whereas with Kevin Owens, it's like, I know he can do it. And I know it wouldn't be a big thing. He's going to make money at either place. So he should go where he's going to be the happiest.
Well, last time this happened, everybody was hell bent that Owens is definitely going to go to AEW, and then he didn't. And the Austin match happens afterwards. So clearly, it was the best decision for him money wise and success wise.
It was definitely the best money decision. He got a great offer to stay. And I think for career it was the best decision too. But I can't say that 100% because he might have just been like a John Moxley in AEW, and that's not a bad position to be in either. Because he could be on top there with that audience and everything. I mean, for him, I would say like his situation in many ways is similar to Bryan Danielson, who did choose to go to AEW, in the sense that there's not a right or wrong decision. There's only two right decisions. And with Kevin Owens, I would say the same thing. There's two right decisions.
Well, I think the best thing that Owens did after re-signing was basically go through the rebirth process where they stripped him back down to what he was when he came in from NXT, even using the old entrance videos and going back to that fighter thing. Because at the time, I mean, he was having fun. He was being silly. There was pandas on his gear. It was like, he's just having a good time. But then this kind of reinvention, rebirth of the old Kevin Owens, even leaning towards Kevin Steen, came back, the fighter, and I think that really upped his stock as well.
Yeah. I mean, he's a great talker, and there's a premium on great talkers right now. And of course, he can go in the ring, which is always a benefit too. But it goes in cycles. I think that there was a period where the wrestling just got so freaking great that great wrestling was, people were just wowed by the wrestling. Well, now you've seen so much of it. So now I think it's really back to the talking again, to where, you really want guys who can talk. But I mean, for him, either way, it could be talking could be in vogue, wrestling could be in vogue, anything could be in vogue. The only thing that would be in vogue that would hurt him would be when bodybuilding is in vogue. And I do not anticipate us going back to that, especially with Vince McMahon gone. I think that having to be the bodybuilder like in the 80s, I think that is not going to be an issue with this modern fan base at all.
We're definitely seeing a lot of different body types, a lot of different wrestling styles all coming in as well. One thing I did want to get your thoughts on as well, since it's happened with Jade Cargill now, definitely a bigger spotlight, it seems, every week in WWE, now one half of the WWE Women's Tag Team Championships. Mitch and Dimitri brought up this great point on the ACT last night, and they were talking about how now you have this power tag team. Do you think that was the best play for them to put those belts on Jade and Bianca? Because here now you have two very formidable, very strong, very large women who are in this position where how do you beat them?
Bianca Belair's not that large if you're actually around her. She's in fantastic condition. Jade's good size, very good size. And I mean, you do a double take for both of them, but Jade would be, she has that movie star vibe thing, that she's got. But I mean, as far as, I think this is the right thing for Jade Cargill right now. I think that it's very important for her to get a lot of time in. But in a tag team, it's a lot more careful, and she's got a great partner, so she can get better experience. And I think that this is a good tag team for right now. They're not going to be a team in 5 years. They're going to be a team for this run. And I think to ease her in to this style of wrestling and get her out there at the house shows night after night and everything, I think the tag team's a great idea. But yeah, it's not the long-term idea, but I think for right now, it's the right thing to do.
Talking to Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer and WrestlingObserver.com here on McGuire on Wrestling. We're going to take a break in just a moment here with Dave. We'll come back with more. But last thing I want to talk about with you in WWE news came actually from comments from Dana White this past weekend. He was talking about WWE's pay-per-views possibly moving to Sundays this was an interesting combination he threw together. Power Slap on Fridays, UFC on Saturdays, and WWE on Sundays. First of all, is Power Slap any part of TKO?
Dana and Lorenzo Fertitta own it. So it's not owned by TKO, but it's Dana owns it, and Dana is a giant officer in TKO. And the reality is they promote it. So it's kind of like it is, if you know what I mean.
So by affiliation, I got you.
It's like they don't own it, but UFC certainly promotes Power Slap very hard, yes.
Does it make that big of a difference, you think, for WWE and UFC to be on separate nights, or can they still split a Saturday?
You can do it, and it doesn't really harm them. Like last Saturday, I think both of them did not do well, but it's because neither of them had the giant card. Yeah, I think if they both have a giant card, they would both do well. There is an overlap, of a couple percent, maybe 5%. So it's like, you don't need to split them up on different nights. And actually, WWE was a Sunday thing forever. And then Nick Khan was the one who brought it to the Saturday thing, thinking, all sports are on Saturday. As far as I know, all the WWE shows that I'm aware of are still Saturdays, except for the WrestleMania Sunday. But the idea that they may sell to like foreign governments would be something along the lines of, you can get, I don't know where Power Slap fits in, because I don't know if foreign governments generally would really want that. But the idea of you get a UFC pay-per-view on a Saturday night and a WWE pay-per-view on a Sunday night, and you pay us $10 million, or some crazy number. And it works out really well for all concerned. So we had lifetime of WWE on Sunday. And the reality is AEW ended up doing a little bit better when they moved to Sunday. So Sunday might be better for wrestling, because Saturday, you're getting more competition sports on a Saturday night than you are on a Sunday night. So maybe Sunday's better for pro wrestling.
Well, the one argument that I did see from some people on X or on Twitter was that the international fans particularly love the Saturday WWE pay-per-views because, it's not that big of a slog for them, just because of the time differences when they're watching ones that are based on a North American time zone, especially. So, I mean, it's such a weird world now, because again, everything that used to be the tradition with pay-per-view and wanting to keep everything domesticated that way and keeping the revenue from that doesn't really matter anymore with today's streaming world. So now it's truly a global market.
And the time slot doesn't matter either. I mean, some of these overseas shows. Now, like I said, the last one didn't do that great. I mean, but many of them have done absolutely great, because people will just watch at their convenience on Saturday if it's a Saturday morning show, or Saturday in the middle of the night show, or whatever, whenever it's going to be, depending on the local time slot. Peacock's thing is that they don't look at the live number anymore. They look at the 24-hour number. I mean, we're getting lots of European shows that are over early, and there's a convenience to that too. I used to like UFCs early in the day, from Europe. And I used to like, and I do like WWE shows on Saturday, morning my time, and middle of the afternoon, you're done, you've seen it, you can go on with your day. But, obviously for maximum viewership, it's the prime time is always going to be best.
We've got Dave Meltzer here. We're going to take a quick break, come back more, talk about some AEW, and also some news on the business landscape of pro wrestling.
This is McGuire on Wrestling. Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
With Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer, we've covered some ground in WWE. Let's cross over to AEW right now. Dave, got to get it right out of here. What's the top program in AEW right now?
Young Bucks against, FTR and Bryan Danielson and hopefully Eddie Kingston, because I want to tell you something, man. That Eddie Kingston thing was very scary, and I know he was hurt last night, but I don't know the severity of it. I guess the word I was told is cross your fingers. It wasn't, it didn't appear that it was as bad as it may have first looked, but we don't know for sure. We don't know if he's going to be able to do that pay-per-view. I mean, we'll probably know by Wednesday because they'll shoot angles if he can't do it.
Well, the injury bug definitely hitting AEW and WWE again, as it tends to do. And I don't know if it's a cyclical thing, but we always seem to have this period with both companies, oddly at the same time, where there seems to be this lull sometimes of a lot of people out for different reasons. And hopefully Eddie doesn't join that list long term. Well,
I mean, they put up men and women King of the Ring bracketing, and in 1 week, three of the people are out. Zelina Vega is out. She got hurt last week. I'm not even sure what the injury is. Lashley got hurt. I heard in training, I believe, not even in a match. And then Drew, Drew's been hurt he's been hurt since the pay-per-view. He worked afterwards, but or worked through it. And now it's like they're trying to have him rest. Yeah. But at first, he was going to be, obviously they were all in the King of the Ring bracketing, and Drew probably would have done real well. I'm sure Punk would have cost him at some point, but we didn't even get to that point.
Well, again, fingers crossed for both sides, and obviously anybody in wrestling. Stay healthy out there, friends. Okay, this is something that came up through some feeds, and I wanted to get your comments on it. If there are comments, I have seen your response to it. But Kenny Omega, who we talk about an awful lot, you and I, because, of course, you and him go way back as well, made some comments about your rating system. And I do have the exact quote if we want to go through it, but it's...
that's fine.
Okay. So this was during one of his Twitch video game live streams, and he does a lot of commentary on wrestling and his role in AEW and all sorts of things. And he talks about basically anything. That's the appeal of these Twitch streams for a lot of folks. So his comments about you when it came to your star ratings, he's jumped the bleeping shark, so it doesn't count for much anymore. He has jumped the mother bleeping shark, and guess who's to blame for that? Me. I'm the guy. I broke the scale. I effed up something in his brain where he doesn't even know what a good match is anymore. You're smiling.
Well, because it's an angle for Will Ospreay. I mean, Will Ospreay did the same thing, the day before, essentially with, and Kenny's done that since the feud with Will Ospreay started in September 2022 before they went to the Tokyo Dome, January 2023. That's part of the deal, is his idea of that, that I overrate Will Ospreay. This is his angle. I overrate Will Ospreay matches, and Will Ospreay failed as a draw in New Japan, when, of course, we all know COVID was the reason that New Japan went down as a draw. But it's Kenny trying to build up heat and be, essentially a heel for Will. But it's a total angle. He's been doing it for a while, and I know some people got really mad at me for saying it was an angle, and a lot of people just don't want to believe it. But if you watch the unrestricted podcast, and then Kenny the next day, they're doing this. They want to do another match, and of course, man, they had two of the best matches you'll ever see. Of course, they want to do another match, especially now where it appears that Kenny's a little bit more positive about being able to come back. He's having the surgery. They've done the angle with Okada. So I think that Kenny's going to come back and be able to do it. And obviously...
So he's going to be a heel for Ospreay, but he's a baby against the Elite.
It can be whatever it is.
I guess, yeah. And I don't want to pull the curtain too far back here, but like you said, doing the angle with Okada as a fan and someone who hopes for the best for wrestlers, obviously, it actually made me happy to see him be doing that. So like you said, I do think the prognosis for him physically is probably maybe a little better than we're being led on to believe. But either way, it was just kind of interesting that your star ratings have once again come into the discussion of things now coming in to a full-on wrestling angle. So,
well, no, he did that for the original match at the Tokyo Dome, and not so much for Forbidden Door. I don't think the Forbidden Door. I don't think he mentioned it, but the other one at the Tokyo Dome, he did the exact same thing. It was just like, I can't help it, or whatever. Dave Meltzer overrates all your matches, type of a thing, for Will, which was again, they have, obviously, they're going to have the greatest respect for each other's ability because they're two of the best to ever have done it. It's funny because it's so controversial because Bryan Danielson was on TSN this week and he was asked, who's the greatest Canadian wrestler of all time? And he said, people are going to get real mad at this, but it's Kenny Omega. And then they go, what about Bret Hart? What about Bret Hart? And he goes, oh, Bret Hart's, whatever. It's like I have nothing but respect for Bret Hart, kind of hinted about Owen Hart, grew up watching. Nothing bad about Bret Hart, but he just, a lot of, Kenny, and look, whatever. I'm not going to say anyone's the greatest Canadian wrestler of all time. I'm just going to say they're both fantastic in similar ways and also in different ways.
Well, I'm going to give a shout out to Iron Mike Sharp. Loved that guy. Okay, sticking with AEW here. We talked about this a little bit last week. People are starting to notice it a little more. Swerve Strickland is in a main event program with Christian Cage, but is Swerve Strickland playing second fiddle to everything else in AEW right now?
Yes. I mean, I don't want to say second fiddle, but the main program is clearly the Anarchy in the Arena. That's clearly the main event on this pay-per-view, and his match will be number 2 on the pay-per-view. But they're giving it ample time, and they're doing storylines, and they're featuring him. He's going to wrestle Brian Cage on Wednesday. But, I mean, is he in the main event on the next pay-per-view? I mean, no one's told me the match order, but I would just presume that you go with Anarchy in the Arena last because it's harder to follow. But, I say it's the number 2 storyline that they're doing right now. And after Anarchy in the Arena, depending on, again, who he faces, there's a lot of guys, but a lot of them are injured. The guys that could probably, do the biggest business with him. Max comes to mind immediately. Omega, of course. Ospreay's not injured, but there's a lot of long-term potential in Swerve if the direction is long-term. I don't expect it to be short, like him losing in the next month or two. But how long, and I think how long depends on many different factors. If he really hits it big, then, keep it going until he's, it's as long as it's drawing. And if it doesn't, then, go to Wembley. And I think Ospreay should be champion at some point fairly soon, not in the next few months, certainly not before Wembley. But AEW is in an interesting situation because it's like the TV that they did Wednesday was good, and the TV they did last night I thought was really good, but they're still in that stigma. It's not viewed as being the cool thing. Hopefully, turn it around to a degree, at least make it a little bigger. Last night was cool because they had a really big crowd. I mean, Edmonton was a nice crowd considering, they had the playoff game and everything. Mm-hmm. I thought it ended up being a pretty decent crowd, but the Vancouver crowd was great last night. But when I look at the advances coming forward, it's like, I can't say this is a turnaround. I want to see this consistently week in, week out. And I don't see that, right now. I don't see these big advances or anything like that. So
we need stars, man. That's what it comes down to. We need big stars that are making big impacts. And right now in AEW, that's kind of lacking. I think it's a fair statement to make.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely. That's why it's so important for Swerve and for Will Ospreay and Mercedes Moné, as another one, to click in some way. I mean, in some meaningful way where they can really move numbers. And it may be, if they don't, I wouldn't blame it on them because it's very hard in the number 2 promotion to do it. But, it's not impossible, but it takes a lot. And again, with WWE being hot, it's really hard. I mean, it's because if you look at AEW, I mean, the key thing with AEW is that they've really, like, most of their audience is still there, but the 18 to 34 audience has gone way, way down. And that audience also has gone way up for WWE. So you see this transfer of audience, and that's like your real swing audience. When something's cool, like when AEW was really cool, there were weeks where they could beat Raw and SmackDown in 18 to 34, and a lot of weeks that they could because they were the cool thing with the younger fans. They're not right now. And getting it back is hard, but it's what everyone thrives for. In any entertainment business, not just wrestling business, everyone's looking for that. It's a hard audience to reach, and it's not a very loyal audience to keep, but it's the audience that makes you cool.
Well, we'll see what shakes down this week. Also keeping an eye on the Vince McMahon, WWE, Janelle Grant lawsuit. We'll get more updates on that next week as we're waiting for that response from WWE to come out. But in the meantime, Dave, as we wrap things up, what are some things people can read about in your last edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter?
Well, it went, very hard on the WWE and UFC financials and all the things in the financial call from this last week. I never thought I would see a quarter where TKO would lose $250 million, but they did because of that the Kung Lee lawsuit. It's an aberration. If it was anything but an aberration, I'd go, oh my God, this is, it's like, they lost more money than WCW in its entire existence. That's how much money they lost because of that lawsuit. But luckily for them, they are financially equipped. Wall Street actually liked that.
I was going to say that actually speaks to how much money they have. If they're still okay,
it speaks to how profitable they usually are, and the fact that their business is so solid that Wall Street will go, you know what? At least it's not $1 billion in a lawsuit. That's scary. $335 million is it's not a small amount of money, but it's almost like when it was over, Wall Street was like, that's a relief. We thought might end up being like $1 or $2 billion, which really would hurt. So. Their stock's actually doing great, even with that quarter, afterwards. So, Wall Street didn't panic at all over those losses, and they're not going to lose money going forward. That's the last time, unless there's another crazy lawsuit. Not that's crazy, because obviously if it was crazy, they wouldn't have settled for that much money.
Right.
There got to be a lot of substance to that lawsuit, because you don't settle for $335 million unless you are scared to death to go to trial. And luckily for them, the other side was scared to death to go to trial too, or else we'd be in a trial.
Well, there you have it. Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer, WrestlingObserver.com. Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you for being here, and we'll catch up next week.
Okay, have a great week.
Still to come on the show, going to take you on the road with me for a couple of dates with CWE, Canada's Wrestling Elite. Had a chance to hang out with them and do a couple shows with Savio Vega and AEW writer Jimmy Jacobs. But next, we're going to hear from a couple of you out there who have been to recent AEW events. We're going to go to Edmonton's AEW Dynamite. A couple people I know were there. We're going to get their feedback on the experience. Remember, if you want to reach out at any time, find me on the socials at McGuire Show or email me directly, McGuireShow@yahoo.com.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
You got to stream the alternate commentary table. Every single Saturday, it's brought to you on the McGuire on Wrestling feed. I'm one half of your host, Dimitri Karolis, and I'm here with my partner, Mitch Hondras. Mitch, what is the alternate commentary table?
It's simple. It's the perspective of wrestling from the other side of the railing, the real fans.
That's right, the perspective that you need. You might have a little bit of fun, too. The alternate commentary table. Subscribe free now to the McGuire on Wrestling podcast feed wherever you get your podcast. Cha-cha!
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
I always love talking wrestling with you, either directly as one guy on the side of the microphone here, but it's even better when we can bring other voices in. Now, even though I'm back in Alberta, I did not get a chance to go to AEW Dynamite this past Wednesday in Edmonton. Fortunately, I know people that did. So we've got a couple of them standing by. First of all, a good friend of mine, Kyle Jago's on the line. Kyle, you were there. How was your AEW Dynamite Edmonton experience this time around?
The show itself was fun.
Okay.
But I think that, and you've been seeing this on even your Facebook group and online.
Mm-hmm.
I think the crowd this time was a little more, they were amped up. And because of the playoffs, etc., I don't know how many of them were there as casual fans. I don't know how many of them were there just to say, okay, we're in the area for the hockey game anyway. Let's go see this for $50 or $60 or whatever. Couldn't tell you. But I think that the last time we went, it was a lot more welcoming crowd. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Do you feel like there were fans that were there almost out of obligation? Like, we're wrestling fans, we should be here.
There were some chants that went up in my section, not exactly around us, but even to the side. When one of the women's matches was on, they just start chanting, "We want puppies," and I'm just like, "What is this? What is this? 20? Is this 1999? What are you?
Okay.
What are you guys here for?" And I'm not sure if that's just they haven't watched anything since the Attitude Era and then said, well, there's a wrestling show, let's go to it. Maybe.
Yeah.
The Let's Go Oilers chant, I thought was, especially during Serena Deeb's part, I'm just like, come on, guys, really? Because it was their way of saying this is boring. I think that a lot of the crowd reactions when it came to the actual in-ring content was great. We actually did see a bunch of Edmonton based or Alberta based wrestlers in the mix this time around.
Yeah, a ton of those. We were talking about those with Dave Meltzer. You had Mo Jabari, Harlan Abbott. Who else was there that you recognized?
I mean, Mo was the one I recognized the most, but there was a huge amount of the crowd who was chanting "Let's go Harlan" And I'm not sure if they just happened to know who this guy was or if they were just going up.
Well, he's running Top Talent Wrestling there too, so they're doing some pretty amazing shows as well. So yeah, I mean that was always the kind of cool thing when WWE or now AEW would come to town. Every once in a while, you'd get those enhancement matches where you get the local talent and you get to see your guy or girl in there. So let's go from the content more to your personal fan experience.
Yes.
Whereabouts were you guys sitting?
We were facing the stage in the bowl, so we pretty much had we weren't spending a whole bunch of money on tickets, but we had a really good view of the ring. I think next time I go to the AEW, and I will definitely go to AEW the next time they come around, I will try to get like the upper bowl that you see in the camera shot, so you can tend to see a bit more down. So
how much were your tickets, if you don't mind me asking?
$85.
Okay, and do you get those rather early when they came out, or was that towards the end?
I got them day one. I know that when it comes to the Canada shows, sometimes it is hard for them to put people in seats. And I mean, even the last time they were in Regina, my mom had to put on Facebook, "Oh yeah, they're giving away free tickets to the AEW show," and I'm like, "What?"
Well, those Saskatchewan shows are famous on this podcast because I was talking about it from day one. Like, what an awful idea to do AEW shows or both any indoor shows in Saskatchewan during the summer. You know this. You've got family down there where it's you're in Lake Country you get a good month of it at most. Yes. And it was right in the smack dab of that. But I mean, this is a far different subject here. Did you pick up any merch? I know you're not a huge merch guy, but did you pick up any shirts, or was there anything you were going to look at when you were going there?
I'm not. I am receptive to merch if there's something I want, and it's been a complaint for me and some of the crew the past twice we've gone to these shows is that the level of merch that was there was not worth the money.
Well, Kyle, if unique designs are your thing, may I invite you to McGuireShow.com for some of the MOW podcast t-shirts. But in the meantime, in all seriousness, buddy, overall, you said you will go to AEW again. Do you feel overall you got your money's worth going to this show? That's always the big question.
Yes, I always enjoy a live wrestling show. And when it comes to a televised show like Dynamite, I enjoy watching the product every week. And it is really fun to actually be there for that. And I mean, last year's thing was so focused on the tag team tournament that they had in the summer that there wasn't much other than that. It was like a lot of tag team things, which is fine. I don't mind tag team wrestling. But this was a lot more, this seems to be your kind of standard Dynamite.
We got Andre in Edmonton, who was also at the Dynamite and Rampage tapings. That was a busy night down there, of course, that. And there was still an outdoor Oilers viewing party, right?
Yeah, it was crazy outside. You walked outside and just people everywhere watching the game in the square and across the street, and the bars were full all downtown. It was crazy.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about your experience at the show. First of all, when did you get your ticket? Did you get it right when they went on sale? Did you wait a bit?
We got ours right on sale. We like to drink rail tickets. So they got the stools. So it's a little more comfortable. It gives you a little more room in between people. You can adjust so the smaller people can get a little closer together and those bigger people can have a little more room. It's nice that way.
So as for the show then, your thoughts coming out of it overall?
I had a great time. Like, again, I cover Japanese wrestling on my channel, on my YouTube channel, and getting to see Jay White, Rocky Romero, when those two were announced to wrestle, I was so excited. Mariah May being announced on that show was incredibly awesome because I watched her all through last year in Stardom. I was just excited to see her. And then Mina Shirakawa showing up was the moment I marked out for most on that show because I have been such a big fan of her since I started watching Stardom a few years ago. And her just showing up in Edmonton, Alberta, of all places, I was like, oh my God. But the whole show throughout was so good. I enjoyed everything about it. The ROH tapings after were phenomenal, getting to see some of those guys there. Matt Menard got probably the best reaction of the night outside of Edge.
I've said this for a while. I think that Menard, and maybe it's just a Canadian thing, I don't know, but Matt Menard to me is one of the most underrated talents in that company. I won't say he's like the greatest wrestler of all time. I won't say he's the worst wrestler of all time, but I mean, he gets the job done in the ring. But I think as a character, as somebody you can get behind or go against, he's there. And by all indicators, you were messaging me saying that he was the guy at the end of that taping for sure.
Oh, like yeah. Outside of maybe Edge, because again, the biggest Canadian on the show, I think he got an insanely good reaction because he's such a dynamic guy. He has the ability to be this slimy, smarmy heel, but he has that ability to just be the most like a super charming underdog baby face that this crowd just got behind that night. And he cut this great promo after, just putting the crowd over huge. And this crowd loved him.
Did you pick up any merch?
I didn't, because by the time I got there, the lineup was gigantic, and I already had a couple buddies go through who were earlier on in line, and they said merch, a bunch of the stuff I wanted was already sold out, because I was looking to get a Bruv shirt, but that sold out very quickly.
Overall, do you feel like you got your money's worth for the night?
Oh, 100%. Got great action from start to finish. Lots of great wrestling action. And I just had a great time with my friends just watching what we love. And that's all I want with professional wrestling.
I love that. Well, Andre, you do a podcast, a wrestling podcast as well. Tell us about it. Give it a plug.
Yeah, youtube.com/@Andre and Melba Wrestling Talk. We cover New Japan. We cover Stardom. We're going to be covering the new Marigold promotion that's starting on the 20th of May. And we do a show called Chop Talk where we cover all the local independent wrestling we're doing. I got 2 episodes of Chop Talk coming out this week covering the CWE show from last week that features Savio Vega and Jimmy Jacobs. And we have another one about the Top Talent show that had Mustafa Ali and ROH's Queen Aminata.
There you have it. Andre from Edmonton. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you very much, sir.
Couple of great perspectives there. Thank you to Kyle and Andre for contributing their thoughts on Edmonton. If you were at the Vancouver show for Collision, or tell you what, if you're listening anywhere, you're getting a live WWE, AEW. If you have a great indie promotion that's doing something cool and you want to come on the show, just drop me a line. We talk about it every show, how you can do that. McGuireShow.com has all the contact information as well. Before we go, though, because we're having some fun talking about wrestling and things we've seen over the last couple weeks here, I want to share with you my experience with the last couple days on the road with Canada's Wrestling Elite. And trust me, what I went through in the last 2 days is nothing compared to the hard work these guys and girls do every single night. They've been doing it for almost 3 weeks now. They had special guests Savio Vega, as well as Jimmy Jacobs from AEW, Ring of Honor, history, of course, and more on their shows, and even Mike McGuire hosting a couple of them. But I got some fun stories to share with you. That's on the way as we wrap up episode number 54. Thank you so much for being here.
This is McGuire on Wrestling. Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
Last segment of the show this week. Thank you so much again for being a part of it. Thank you for downloading, subscribing, leaving 5-star reviews. This is the same thing that podcasters say every week, but it really does make a difference. Not just from a personal standpoint. Like, yeah, sure, you like to hear that people think you're doing all right, but people are catching on to this show, and word is getting out. So thank you for spreading the word, talking about the fact that this is a fun place to talk about the current events. We get a different Dave Meltzer, I feel, here than even on his own shows sometimes, because I won't let him go into the mean nitty-gritty stuff that sometimes people say he gets into. Although I've never really experienced it personally, I've seen the quotes, I see how things can get misunderstood, misconstrued, yada, yada, yada. But I think we've got a really positive thing going on here, and it's all because you help keep that up. So just so you know that we know that you know what's going on here, and we really do appreciate it. Cue Jack Janet and Chrissy any second now. Anyway, I wanted to share this story with you while we got the time, talking about my experience this past weekend with Canada's Wrestling Elite, CWE. Now, I had done a show for them a few months back. They were happy with my ring announcing, with my whatever I do, and they said, hey, do you want to come back for a couple shows? I need a guy for Calgary and for... Well, they actually wanted me for 3 shows. They wanted me for Calgary, they wanted me for Medicine Hat, and they wanted me for Swift Current. And I said, Calgary and Medicine Hat, no problem, but I do a morning show on Monday morning, and there's no way I'm going all the way out to Swift Current, Saskatchewan, first of all, for any reason. Sorry, Speedy Creek, not a fan. But secondly, if you're listening from Swift Current, I apologize to you, but I have my reasons. Anyway, I have... the couple bookings, so I'm set. I'm ready to go. I'm excited. I decide I'm going to go pick up the camper, Lois's Dream Machine, the Wrestle Wagon, if you would. I'm thinking of actually getting some little artwork put on it for the Wrestle Wagon, kind of like a little small text thing. It's always going to be Lois's Dream Machine, but I think that, acknowledging the Wrestle Wagon would be kind of cool. Maybe I'll hang something up on the inside that indicates it's the Wrestle Wagon. I do have the bathroom door signed by people that have been interviewed in the Wrestle Wagon. So Bret Hart, The Godfather, Harry Smith, Raj Singh. I almost got Savio in there, but that sounds weird when you say it like that. Anyway, here's why I don't have follow-up interviews with those guys. A, there's a couple of great interviews in this podcast feed, this very feed. And if the Jimmy Jacobs one isn't, I'll get it because I still have all my audio. But the Jimmy Jacobs conversation is one of my favorites of all time. But B, it's because we've already promoted the shows. They're basically done the tour now. And when I hooked up with them, it was on day 14 of this 17-day tour. So think about that for a second. 14 days, different town every night, doing a wrestling show, setting up the ring, wrestling, tearing down the ring, loading it back up, hitting the road, doing the same thing over and over again. People showing up, people not showing up. Tickets, no tickets, who knows what's going on. Every town is different. Every market is different. Every place reacts differently to wrestling shows. We're seeing that with the big companies, let alone with independent wrestling. I will say this, is that CWE, when their team is on the ball, they are on the ball. And sometimes they reach out to people in smaller markets that do a great job, like guys in Medicine Hat. And in other markets, sometimes they don't do as good of a job. But nevertheless, a couple of great shows. Great time hanging out personally with Savio Vega, first of all. I have to say that because at first I come up to him. I said, hey, man, I don't even know if you remember me. We talked a few months ago. He's like, oh, yeah, absolutely. And we shared some laughs, told some jokes, and he borrowed my shoe polish. So there's that. Glad I had the shoe polish. Could help out the man, Savio Vega. Los Barriqua, you know. I don't know if that helped him or not, but he was very happy to see the shoe polish. He's like, hey, look at you. You're a professional, man. I said, sure, let's go with that. So we do the Calgary show, all well and good. Afterwards, Jimmy Jacobs is there, and if you remember the interview I did with Jimmy Jacobs, it was a very deep conversation that came from a wrestling interview. And Jimmy is, of course, working with All Elite Wrestling now as well. He's a writer. He's part of their creative team, and he helps come up with stuff that we see, and maybe the stuff we like, maybe the stuff we complain about. I don't know. I never ask because I'm just happy to see my friend Jimmy. So we caught up, told some stories, and we'll be talking again. You know, that's the bottom line there. That's all I'm going to say about that. So Jimmy goes home. No, that's not true. Jimmy goes to Vancouver for Collision, but the rest of the team, including Savio, are now going to be in Medicine Hat. I, on Saturday mornings, produce and upload the alternate commentary table. So all the music mixing and all that stuff, I do that and I get it posted on the website and on the podcast feed. So I get that done. I then make the drive with the Wrestle Wagon down to Medicine Hat, and I'm telling you, another packed house. Middle market, Southern Alberta, loves its pro wrestling. I'm seeing guys and girls that I know from different shows and everything else. A guy from one of the promotions here, I've told you about it before, Pure Power Wrestling. He wrestles as Sidney Steele. His friend, we'll say, Kevin, is one of the owners. And, well, between the two of them, one of them left Sidney Steele's robe behind at the venue. And I went out to my truck to find it hanging off my door. So, obviously, somebody knows that I was going back to Lethbridge and can get it to him. But I'll be damned if I'm not going to try this thing on before I get it back to him. But again, it was another great show, and it was cool to see the small town support for the local stars. And there's a guy on the roster named Kamikaze, and it's Cam, 2 exclamation points, Kaze. And I've known him since he was a kid, and he got to wrestle Savio Vega that night. And by the way, Savio Vega can still go. Okay, I don't know how long he can go, but he can still go. Like, he was pulling out bumps. He was running around the ring. Like, he was doing stuff. So anyway, Savio and him have a match. They get jumped and beat down. Later on in the show, as you may have seen in the photos on the Team MOW McGuire on Wrestling Facebook page, Quang appeared. Which, that's a Savio Vega deep cut. For those that know, they know. But Quang showed up, and we had a great time with that as well. So, all in all, a great weekend. But I want you to remember this. Next time you go to an indie wrestling show, especially if it's one of these ones where people tour, or if you're going to a major show where people tour, or you know there's a wrestler on the card that tours around the world constantly. This is their job. This is their life. And they do it because they love doing it. Yes, they're making money. Yes, they're doing all these things. But think about that grind I just talked about. Think about the driving. Think about the flying. Think about the putting up, the tearing down of the ring, all this stuff. and then actually wrestling. They do it because they love it. And that's why we celebrate wrestling here. That's the whole point of this show. I did get to dance a salsa for like 3 seconds with Savio, so I'm happy there. But other than that, it was just a great time. A great time getting to be around that fraternity of wrestlers. And it's a community that has kept me engaged and in love with the wrestling business for over 30 years now. Which is gross when you say it like that, because now I'm old. Either way. Thank you for listening to my story this week. Thank you for listening to the show this week. If you haven't heard the ACT from yesterday, do that and enjoy your week, my friend. Wherever you are, watch some wrestling, laugh, cry, get angry on somebody else's website, but come have some fun with us on ours. Until next time, as always, thank you so much for listening and letting me do what I do. Till next time, play safe, drive safe. Be seen ya!